So for those that don't know me, my name is Ellie. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the regional training director for the Northern Midwest Learning Center. I have to get used to saying that new name now. And this is a very awesome webinar that we get to do again with our very, very first webinar speaker, Navakwe, who had joined us way back when we first decided we were going to start doing a monthly webinar series just to give folks some type of learning opportunity that's kind of additional to what you're accessing through YUSA trainings and everything else that you do for leadership development. So for this group and everybody that's joined us along the way, a really big thank you for your commitment to becoming stronger leaders and developing stronger leaders in your communities. I am going to turn it straight over and so that we have time for this amazing conversation. I'll just frame it up. Navakwe and I talked a bit about how we wanted this webinar to go, kind of what other questions we wanted to address through this webinar. And so really this conversation is going to be framed around that conversation and the questions that came up. So you'll see the PowerPoint is just a lot of questions and kind of things that we're pondering that he can give us some guidance over. So I will turn it over now to our speaker, and big round of applause for you. Thank you so much.
No applause needed, but like those virtual like hand things or whatever. But anyway, bear with me while I talk in Ojibwe for a brief moment at least. Um Bujo Ginoa go Ninsa Naokwe Juin Guyan Mi Masa Pashko Manetagong Gion Dadisama Minoago in Jibayanama Pashko Manetagong ne we do kage the Duluth YMCA and Giga Gwajim Mego do we do kage on Anuj Gegu Isanunga Minga Dajandanyo Migo Wenje Nishinabe Moin Gamage Nishinabe Jitwawan and Ujigo Bebakan Nishinabe Moin Anan Gamage Nishinabe Bakan Nishinabe Jitwawanan Bajichigade Gamao YMCA. Me too. So anyway, you could read my bio in the whatever kind of planner or I think it's what it says on the next slide or something. Like go ahead and read Naokwe's bio in the registration piece or something. But my name's Naokwe and I was born and raised well, sort of almost pretty close to where I'm currently at. Literally born here, not in a hospital, but in my great grandparents' house. So anyway, on the what is known as the Fond du Lac Indian Reservation, I'm Ojibwe, or some people say Anishinaabe, and that's located. We're located where Minnesota sort of kind of goes around. The state of Minnesota kind of goes around where we're currently at. I don't say that we're located in Minnesota because Minnesota only exists because of a treaty and was able to get land. The federal government was able to get land from the tribes that are located here and had been located here forever. So anyway, long description to say that I'm right where I was born and raised at on the Fond du Lac Indian Reservation, and I help out with the why with various things. Sarah asked me to help out with various kinds of things, primarily a lot through the Duluth, Minnesota, and neighboring YMCAs. And then at some point, somebody asked me to be on this webinar. And so we did an initial webinar. We had a lot of fun, Ellie and I. And so now we're just a team and we do webinars all over the world. I'm just kidding. We don't do that. This is the only second one we ever did, but I enjoy doing them because I have an opportunity to share some things that I was fortunate enough to kind of learn and pick up. That's kind of how we construct knowledge or how I was taught. It's not all my own. It's just things that I was able to gather or things that I chose to gather and pick up in my life. And I'm trying to do the same thing which is to put those things down for other people to pick up and consider. And so that's how I shouldn't say we, that's how I was raised as an Ojibwe to think about knowledge and think about what we can learn, because that's how we do it. So I'm humbled and honored to be able to be asked some questions and try to set some things down and maybe challenge your minds a little bit, and also gain something hopefully from you all as well. And that's my hope for it. So we'll go right into this. I can't make you do anything. I used to be a school teacher for many years and an educator in other capacities for many years. And now I get to work for our language. But I used to think I could sort of make a group of students or learners do something. I don't believe in that anymore. So you're either going to do this or you're not. You just can't say that someone never asked you, what do you hold sacred? And what are your core identity pieces? And gave you an opportunity to write them down. So I encourage you to, but it won't be you won't have to share. I'm not a person who makes people do things. So, but if anyone's willing to at the end of this, it would be awesome if someone will. So, gonna ask you, make a list of 4 things that you hold sacred. Now, you take it for what it is. Take sacred for what it is. Take those 4 things for however you make sense out of that. They don't have to be items. Um, you know, they can be people, they can be whatever you put in the box of sacred, and just I encourage you to just put down whatever comes to mind. And if you get all these right, if you pick the 4 that I picked right now, you get a week's vacation free on Naukwe. I'm just kidding. I can't grant you that. I wish that I could. Sorry, humor is really important, especially when you're dealing with important topics like this. You gotta. That's always, maybe that's just an Ojibwe thing. I don't know. Humor is important for me to. So I might joke around a bit. Uh, maybe Ombinikamen Gishpinago Gishitayan. You could put your hand up quick if you're finished with your 4 things you hold sacred. You can also probably see 4 things core to your identity. Those might be different, right? So I might say that I don't know, this is gonna be this is stereotypical, but I'll just do it anyway. I happen to have one here. So I happen to have this feather here that is an eagle feather that somebody came and gave to me just the other day. And I would hold this to be sacred. Um, but I might have a thing to my identity. Doesn't have anything to do with that. That might be something else, like I'm a father. And so I would say that's core to my identity as being a father to my kids. So there's a couple examples. And then I will be looking to see if anyone is willing to share something from your list, just to because you're interested in wanting to do that. And if you want to, you can always throw it in the chat as well. People, like that kind of communication too. Just typing something in there, but it's not a requirement.
I'll share to
All right.
started. I'd say something that is sacred to me that I only really appreciated as such maybe over the last decade is my energy. Like where I put my energy is really sacred to me.
Cool. Miigwech. Miigwech means thank you. I use a lot of Ojibwe. Well, not a lot. I use a little bit, no matter what kind of group I'm working with, just because it's my preferred language, and I get the opportunity to. So, anyone else want to share one or the other, just in a spirit of being together in this? There we got some people using the chat. Family, health, access to education. Oh, and some items. I say nice just because I relate with that. Everything's nice. It's just I relate with that. So I was an educator for many years. I did a lot of workshops and trainings with educators for many, many years on various topics. So I find value in people sharing with each other because that's usually how you can connect with people. You can see what your differences are, you can see what your similarities are, you can see the humanity in somebody, those kinds of things. Because, something sacred to us, something, and parts of our identity is really, we're talking about parts of our culture, right? And some of these things are like below the surface. Like, how many times people ask you, what's sacred to you? Like is that a common practice in your amongst your staff? Like, oh yeah, I know that Jenny Dallas, I know she um she these are a couple of things that are sacred to her. Like, I don't know. I got some colleagues right outside the door. I'm not even sure if I know what's sacred to them. But we do now know that motherhood is core to Jenny Dallas's identity. Thank you for everybody that's sharing in the chat. Feel free to pop in there and see what others are uh, sharing in there as well. So you might be wondering, well, why are we starting out with this? I thought the topic was going to be about, names and language and stuff, working on in the Y with, like, American Indian, Native American, indigenous tribal things. Um, wow, enjoy those questions at dinner. I hope they go well. Whoever uses that at dinner. A couple of important questions to me. Are there things that I hoped I'd have done this with my kids, my own children, because I really wanted them to be strong in their identity. I wanted them to be filled up with positive identity. I wanted them to be aware of the negative identities that were being placed upon them. I wanted them to understand how important their identity is to them and how it gets developed and where all the different kinds of things come from. And it's not always positive, but that's a whole nother kind of training. We're not doing that training here today, but it's a part of everything we do, and it's a part of this conversation or this topic. So the reason that I picked out sacred and things like core to your identity, given the topic and the kind of questions that we're going to talk about, is because even though uh maybe your name, like the name that you have, your given name, maybe there's like a big long story, maybe there's like it's connected to one of your family members, and maybe I'm the third. So it's always been a part of my identity. I use the number 3 all the time. I put 3 dots on things when I mark it because I'm the third. My grandpa and my great grandpa were both had the same English name as I did, and that's part of my identity. And so it means something. Maybe your name, you don't have that. You're just like, I don't know. My mom or dad or whoever picked your name liked it and they just went with it. But maybe it's really important. And when we get into things about like names of YMCA camps or names of certain um, things in the Y or whatever, uh, some of those things are sacred or are core to specific tribes or people's identities, right? And yet they've been used. Sometimes they've been changed in the past. Sometimes they're still out there. We'll get into all that. But I wanted to put this out there for everyone to have the chance to sort of put themselves like emotionally and mentally into like some of the things that we'll talk about, because using a name of a place or a name of a tribe as a name for something can be really core to one's identity. If you go back to the first screen with that picture of me, sitting in a place that is the homelands of my people as Ojibwe, where we lived for, we would say, from the beginning of time, and it's along this river. And that's not where I was born and raised at. I was born 20 miles up the river where our reservation was eventually made at for 1854. But that's the homeland right there. That's like, we would call that the Mecca, for us. And that word that's above my name there says Ojibwewe. And what that means is he is Ojibwe. It's like a third person thing. Talking about myself in third person is kind of weird there, but that's what you do on like these American slideshows or whatever, so and so is this. So obviously being Ojibwe is core to my identity, right? I put that as the one word to describe myself on this slide. And so, if there was if someone takes the word Ojibwe and then just starts to use it for whatever, that for whatever reason, good, bad, just not knowing anything. When I run into that, I'm running into a word that describes who I am that is core to my identity. Now, someone doesn't know that, but the more the more you know, right? So anyway, fast forward, I just wanted to get people into the space, into the kind of emotional, like, um, you know, if you can get there, hopefully trying to get people to kind of understand some of this. So again, you're just right with the question, like, what's an example of a tribal language or cultural aspect being part of a YMCA? You might have some of these. Again, Ellie and I were talking just before this started. Like the list here is going to come up and it's going to be like, she's like, did you want these? And I was like, yep, I wanted those. Because they're real life. I looked them up. I went on the interweb. I know it's called the internet, but I like to call it the interweb because I'm old. Um, and my kids remind me of that. But I went on there and I looked them up. All the ones that are on here have a website. I actually called a couple of these places the other day because I wanted to know how they pronounce the name of it. Um, and then I wanted to know if they could give me a description of, like, what does that mean, kind of thing. And I told them who I was and what I was doing and whatever. They were all very kind and very helpful. Uh, but I just pulled some examples of ones that I could find out there that are, some are local for me, myself. I don't know wherever all of you are at. I don't know if any of you work at any of these or you went there as a camper or or as a you might have a t-shirt. You might really love these places. Every time I work with the Y, there's usually people who are like, I went to the Y, or I went to camp, or my parents met at a camp, and that's where they first met each other, and then years later they fell in love, and now I'm their kid and I went to the same camp. People have some really strong connections to camps and things like that. So the point of this is not to, I'm not, I never been to any of these or anything. I'm just pointing out the examples of how tribal language or tribal cultures sometimes become a part of a camp. And so we can talk about, they're real. What does that mean? Why is that? How does that happen? What do we do with that? So just as an example, does anyone here, I should look, I can see how many. Does anyone know who Tecumseh is? Did you ever have like I don't know, maybe you went to college, maybe you had a really awesome like high school, middle school teacher or something. Maybe you had a whole bunch of them and they were like, you need to know about this person, Tecumseh, and the importance that he played in the history of the world. Anyone know who Tecumseh actually is? I mean, you can be Googling it right now, especially the handful of people who have their cameras off and they're just listening, thinking like, this Naokwe guy is crazy. I don't know what he's talking about, but you could Google Tecumseh. Um, oh, somebody just said my dad won. Oh, that's it.
That was
Somebody,
me. Yes, my dad wanted to give my
dang,
brother that.
your brother would have been a quite the orator if you know anything about Tecumseh. There were accounts not by Shawnee. Tecumseh was a Shawnee tribal person in the Ohio River Valley. Extremely powerful leader, well known throughout history in the 1800s. And but it's interesting to me that there's like towns and names. And then I saw this, and it was in Indiana, and there's a camp, Tecumseh. And I was like, wow, Camp Tecumseh. And I was thinking, I wonder if these folks know who Tecumseh was? And then it makes me wonder, like, how did he get picked? You could go history.com, has some great couple websites on Tecumseh. Anyway, break it down real quick for you. Tecumseh and his brother, they called him the prophet. Uh, he was more of like a spiritual leader, and Tecumseh was more of an orator, like a really strong, like he could speak and move people with his voice, but he was also willing to go to war. So he's like in the war 1812. He sided with the British, not the Americans, fought against the Americans. He fought in a battle. I can't remember the date and the time around it, but it's like one of the a battle against the Americans. It was like the most casualties that any tribe had again. You know, people think about the Battle of Little Bighorn and whatever. It's like this popular thing where Custer died and whatever out in Dakotas. And like three times as many American soldiers died in this battle. So Tecumseh was not American. He didn't want to be American at all. And he actually made it his life's mission to go around and get tribes that they used to go to war with to come together in a confederacy to fight against encroachment. And he wanted all tribal members to put down anything of like from like American culture, whether it be tools, whether it be foods, whether it be beliefs, anything. He was like, nope, we need to just be and remain who we are as our whatever tribe he was Shawnee, but there's 600 different tribes, so they were not all the same. So anyway, it's interesting to me that how does a camp get named after this man who, if you do a Google search on it, I mean, probably has got named after before there was a Google thing, but if you looked him up in the encyclopedia back in the day, like I had, where you had to go and look up T, and they had the cool foil, alphabetical, tabs in there. Uh, he was he essentially fought against the Americans and wanted everything he could do to try to unite tribes to resist participating things. So anyway, that's one, somehow that happened. You got like camp, it's written as right there as it is family camp. Uh, what they said that on the phone it meant, or pronounced, was Nawaqua. The reason it caught my attention is because it's very close to my name, and I was wondering like, hey, is this camp named Camp Nawaqua? And I was like, that would be cool. I should go visit it. I know where that is. It's in Lac du Flambeau, which is 4 hours away in Wisconsin, east of where I'm at currently. And I know people from what's known as Lac du Flambeau in Wisconsin. It's out of Chicago, apparently, but they have their family camp is up north out of Chicago, Illinois, and it's over in Wisconsin. They do a lot of work with the tribe. I just want to shout them out. And I know people over there, and I actually called them and asked them. And it's I think it's one of the only camps that's on a reservation, a tribal reservation. And they do a lot of work with the tribe there that are also Ojibwe, same tribe as me. And I said, "Do you know what?" She said, the woman on the phone said, "It's Nawaqua." And I said, "Do you know what that means? Does anyone ever talk about that?" And she said, "Well, we're not really sure fully, but this is what they say it means, and it's like the center of the woods." And I was like, "Oh, I can hear that." So I just wrote there how we would write it, which is Nawaqua. There's three examples there, but it means in the middle of the woods. So I was like, "Hey, look at that." A an Ojibwe name for a camp, Nawaqua, Nawaqua, which means in the middle of the woods. And the person who answered the phone knew what it meant. And I thought that was pretty cool. I wanted to just shout that out because to me, if you have a name like whatever, any name for something, they're like, well, what is that name about? You'd want your staff top to bottom, hopefully everybody who's working there, people who get the shirts, the campers, the families, you want them to know how to pronounce that name, I'm assuming, and you want them to hopefully understand what that name embodies, right? You're going to a camp, you're happy there, you're learning all these things about yourself and others, and but that's just that's my cultural perspective on it. Anyway, and then you have camp. I don't know how to pronounce it. I didn't get a hold of anyone there, but it's just north of here. And I don't know if it's Minogan. I thought the word maybe is Minogan, and that's an Ojibwe word, and it means to grow well. Because they're also really closely located. That where that camp happens is pretty close to another Ojibwe reservation, actually. But I didn't get a confirmation on the camp, Minogan or Minogan. And then there's a camp Minikani, and I didn't hear from anyone there, and I couldn't tell from their website what it meant. It was by Milwaukee. So, if any of you saw Wayne's World, you know that Milwaukee is an Algonquin word for meaning I don't remember what they say in that movie, but it is. It's just it's not Milwaukee. It's Minnowakie, which means the place of the good earth. So Ojibwe word. They just put a L in there instead of the N. So anyway, again, just that's an example of how tribal languages and cultural things can come into someone likes the Wayne's World. Sorry, I try to be part of the pop culture, even though that's old pop culture. Somebody said, would Camp Ouija we I'm gonna say it how I know it because that's an Ojibwe word. Would Camp Ouija here in Nashville be a part of the list? And I've never been to Nashville, but Sabrina, for a small fee, maybe even if you just cover my travel expenses, I would gladly come to Nashville and I could tell you all about Ouija. It's interesting. There's two Camp Ouija. There's a Camp Ouija somewhere in Minnesota, or at least there used to be. And Ouija means to be a partner with, or it's not, it doesn't mean to be a partner with. It means your friend, your fellow friend. Like it'd be like if I went to a camp with someone else who spoke Ojibwe, I wanted to share my language with somebody, and I was in a cabin with them. I said, "Oh, shkenagi, kinawago, Ouija. You all are my fellow campers. You're my friends. You're the people I go along with. You stay with is a Ouija wagon." I think if I was going to rewrite that name, I'd write it a little bit differently just so that people could. The thing about writing a word in English from another language is English has about 6 uses for the sounds for the letter A and six for a few for the letter I. So the word can get kind of mixed up pretty quickly. So Ouija could be on there. I'm curious why Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm assuming it's Nashville, Tennessee, has an Ojibwe word, because we're all over the place, but I don't know that we've ever been that far south as a group of people. But maybe they got it from somewhere, I mean, like another camp had it, and they're like, hey, we like the sound of that or whatever. So Ouija could be a part of the list because it's definitely an Ojibwe word. Sorry, long answer for that, but I was interested to see that. All right, another thing, and I'm not going to go too far into this because I know it's a topic many of you might know about these things. Maybe it was before your time. I know it kind of went out of style officially somewhere in the 2000s or early 2000s. There was a thing for a long time as a part of camps and things that they were either just called the Indian guides or the Y Indian guides. And some of you might have been a part of that. I know some of it was specifically focused around fathers or males and male children, and building up their sense of self and things like that. Um, and I know it was real popular for probably the 70s into the 2000s. Obviously, it's changed just like many other things in the world. People learn, people realize, and they learn about concepts like cultural appropriation and all various kinds of things, and just stuff that maybe was in some point was deemed like positive and appropriate, and then realizing as we learn more that maybe it's not the right thing. So but I do know, and if you've never heard of anything about that, there's articles that are out there. There's various things, and sometimes maybe some of these things are still present. It's like when you end something, there's a tradition in a sorority, or there's a tradition in hazing. Take hazing, right? So hazing is something in sports and other groups that like people put uh people through, like to become a member, to have the sense of belonging, and it's this tradition of it. But through time, people have realized that can be really harmful. There's psychological impacts, there can be physical impacts, there's a lot of different things. And so universities or schools and things would say, all right, the rule or the law is there's no more hazing, right? But then, the team or the organization or whatever doesn't always want to fully let go of that because it was a part of them and what they did. And so it still kind of carries on in ways. Or, a law like, hey, everyone should get paid the same amount of money for the doing the same work. You're an executive director, or you're a lawyer, or you're a teacher or whatever. But we still know that I believe in the United States, there's still a huge pay gap between uh, people who identify as male or female. Right now, the law would say, no, we're done with that. Like like we settled that a long time ago, but somewhere in society, they haven't fully given that up. So these practices can still continue. And sometimes there might be some practices from old traditions and things from that. So thanks for moving us forward there. Ellie, I could be talking.
I
I
don't
could talk.
try to
I
hurry
made
you,
like
I promise.
I made 9 slides, and I would talk about all of just one of them for like 45 minutes if you let me.
I never try
Uh,
to hurry you. It's all good.
so I'm just gonna there's no information on here. I'm just throwing this question out, and I'm gonna read the chat a bit because I see some people putting it in there. And I just want you to kind of consider this. I just ask you to consider it. Like, how does how did hey, thanks. I'm gonna read that. Someone said something, they were part of an Indian princess thing. How did things like the Indian guides, how did things like the names of camps and stuff, do you know, or even if you don't know, like if you consider it, how did that even become a thing? Like, how did a camp name become Camp Tecumseh, right? Or like even not just the examples of the ones I gave. There's a whole, there's all kinds of them. How did that like become a thing? I'm just asking you to consider that for a moment. Hey, somebody went to Tecumseh. I missed that earlier. Oh yeah, people are throwing some good stuff in there. Come up on slides later about backlash and changing of names and traditions and stuff. And it's all archives from the Princess program. Wow. Yeah. So yeah, so we got I appreciate everybody willing to share, even those folks who are like, hey, I was there, or hey, this meant a lot to me. But I recognize like these different parts. And then, you can see if you ever want, of course, just encourage you to look at the chats, again, we're here to like learn from each other. We're here to gain understanding, right? I'm not a person to sort of just, I don't know. A lot doesn't come out of just, hey, this is messed up. I want you to feel like I feel, like whatever. To me, it's like, how do we understand these things? How do we do better? How do we navigate the situations? And what I would always say is if you hear something that I say that might challenge you a bit, if you hear something or read something that somebody else writes or says that might challenge your concepts or whatever a bit, I would encourage everybody, think back to that list of sacred things to you. Think back to the things that are core to your identity, and try to remember that some of the things that we're talking about might be on somebody else's list, if that makes sense. Right? Like if you had a Camp Ojibwe, like I said, with the example right at the front, and I wasn't intentional, it just came to me in the moment, is the one word I used to describe myself on the cover of this slideshow was Ojibwe. And so if you turn a camp into it, but nobody knows what that means, nobody has any concept of that. And I'm wondering, why is this camp named after this thing that's core to me? And so it'd be similar to if somebody else took some of those things core to you and started using them with no kind of understanding, um, and things like that. So let's get into this a little bit. Anyone willing to share? How do you think this even became a thing?
See, Charlene had dropped some stuff in the chat as well.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody said, it's a cool thing to do. A lot of towns and rivers and places in this country that are versions of or very direct from a tribal language. Uh, Mississippi, the Ojibwe word, Mississippi. That's how we say it in our language. It means giant or large river. So the Mississippi River is an Ojibwe word for it, Mississippi. Um, yeah, and people just doing it without the significance. There's a whole thing around mascots, how sports teams and things utilize the imagery and names um, for American Indian people and tribes and different things and items. Uh, so it'd be definitely a part of. And then you got the whole concept of like paying homage or homage to, um, you know, a group of people or an idea of a group of people. But a big thing. All right, I just need to throw that out there, novelty, all that. And we'll unpack a bit because time's cruising by. Let's get into some more stuff here. See what we got here. We might I'm gonna skip this because it take too long, but it's a great exercise. If you just go back for one moment, Elliot, I was gonna ask you, I'll draw a picture of something Native American or American Indian, this whole racial group. I mentioned it earlier, there's hundreds. Federal government recognized something like 565 different tribes speaking like 200 different languages. That's just in the United States alone. What current United States, and before there are whole tribes that are no longer in existence anymore. So that is a racial group, you know. So drawing something from a racial group is very different than if you're drawing something specific from like Ojibwe. That's a specific tribal group. Or Ho Chunk, that's another specific tribal group. So we're just going to do an exercise of like get in our brains to do something different between like, well, that's what the Indians did. And I use that term loosely. And I wouldn't encourage you to use it. You could use indigenous, you can use American Indian, Native American, any of those are much more preferred. But that was kind of the mentality is like, well, that's what they used to do. So they used to have these drums or they used to have these bows and arrows. They used to make these things and make these homes or do these different things or use these words. But there is no Native American language. There's hundreds of different languages and tribes right next door to each other currently today could speak completely different language families. So it'd be like having a Russian person living next door to an Italian person. They're not in the same language family even. And that's true about Ojibways and that other tribe down there, Ho-Chunk. So just wanted to get us in our mindset of like unlearning kind of like this concept that there's like this whole all Native Americans are the same kind of tribe. We're not. We're very distinct and different, just like all of us. Why should we address it? We can all have our own ideas. People have been bringing it up, talking about it. Um, why can a name or an image be offensive? Because we got to consider who defines offensive. And if you're in a position and you're like, well, I don't find that defensive. And I asked 5 friends or I put it on the internet and we asked people and everyone in the community said, no, that's not offensive. I'm going to, I don't want to pick on them, but they were willing to be so honest. So Camp Ouijawagan in Nashville, I'm really rooting for an opportunity to take a trip to Nashville. So I'm gonna keep shouting this out. But I'm gonna guess that if you asked nearly everyone in the Nashville area if Ouijawagan is offensive, first of all, I think they're gonna say, I don't know what that is. And second of all, I think they're gonna say, nah, I think that's cool. I went there or whatever. So who defines what something being offensive is an important question to ask. And so, we got to get over that. We got to hold that concept really close to us when we think about it. Because if we rely back on, well, it's not offensive to me and it's not offensive to my neighbors or just this one community, um, that's not a very global perspective. That's not a very open perspective, I would say. And so I would just encourage thinking about it that way. What does resistance to changing a name or a practice look and sound like? Some people have talked about it in the chat. You can look at that. These are real life examples. I bet there's a lot of examples at the Ys that you work at, not just in this specific topic, but other things. The biggest one being all of the people over the years, generations sometimes, that went to those camps and they had that name, right? If you're talking about a name. And it's connected to their feelings and their emotions. And like I said earlier, the fact that somebody, my parents met at camp wherever, like that's a thing. And so the resistance oftentimes is about changing things and changing traditions that were meaningful to people. But sometimes those things should change because they are, in fact, in some ways, to many people or to certain groups of people, offensive. And it wasn't necessarily known, it wasn't necessarily intentional. But the fact of the matter is that it was, or that it is, but it can be a lot. There can be a lot of resistance to it. And I think it's important to be intentional, be knowledgeable of that, and be aware of it so you can kind of proactively work with any resistance to change, no matter what it is. It could be this topic, it could be any topic, but it's like being aware and being knowledgeable. What are the reasons we're holding on to traditions? There's got probably tons of them. Ask somebody, they can tell you. You got this concept of like, hey man, we're just honoring it. It's a local tribe or it's a local person or whatever it is, and we want to honor that idea of that. And I'd ask you to think about that list of sacred things to you. I'd ask you to think about those core identity pieces. And if I took that as an Ojibwe and then I placed all my Ojibwe philosophy and concepts and constructs around it and kind of did what I wanted with it, how would you feel? Right? Would that make you feel any kind of way? It wouldn't be that I'm intentionally doing it. I just like the word or I like the concept or something. But I didn't hold it true to what it is to you. I just determined it for myself. And so, the idea of honoring something, what do you do when you honor something? And what would you want people to do to honor those sacred things that you thought of for yourself? What does honoring look like? As opposed to stealing. I think I said like taking or using, and Ellie was like, let's just call it what it is. uh, Someone just taking it and doing whatever they want, turning it into, and me doing an image of something that I look in the chat here and I see something that's important to somebody, and I'm like, well, I'll just use that word, but I'll make my own image for it. And I don't know what they even were talking about. I just like it. And then I'm putting it out there and selling it or doing whatever. So I think it's important to think about honor and what does that really mean to each of us as we look at the words, the names of practices. And then we look at what place should tribe or does tribal culture have in our camps and our Ys? Like, what is that they should have? I talked about and I pointed out Nawakwa it's in a place called Waswaganing, actually, the place of the torches. But it's an Ojibwe reservation and tribe there, called Lac de Flambeau in French, which I think means Lake of the Torches. And so they're trying to be real intentional. You can look up on their website. They talk about working with the tribe and having things at their camp where tribal members come out and share some games and activities and different kinds of things. It's the tribal members of that community where that camp happens, sharing those things, choosing to share those things, and being intentional about that collaboration. And I would just say, with not a lot of time to focus on it, is that, if you're going to do anything with a tribal culture or something that's associated with that, just take out tribal, just any culture. Like, what business do I have picking up something from Jewish culture and just and belief structures and just start doing it at a camp here with a bunch of Ojibwe kids? Like, is that cool? Like, is that all right? Should I, or should I ask around? Should I bring in some folk? If I really want folks to learn about something from that, to build them up, to build up their sense of identity and who they are and build skills and all those things, um, how important is it attached to a cultural group? Or is it a skill? Is it a way of being, a way of thinking? So, that's important. I'll just share that out there. And then, this whole idea of being like restorative versus hollow. So if you're going to change something, anything, but definitely when you get into this realm of changing a name or changing a practice or letting something go, you can do changes and they kind of feel hollow, or just the way I describe it. But then you can experience change where, it's in the spirit of being sort of restorative. It's in the spirit of being collaborative and together and really being open and intentional. So it's like hollow is kind of like, well, either we're not changing it because I got one person who said that's cool and they're a member of this tribe and it's all good. So we're going to stick with it. I got our one person to sign off on it. Or you only do it because you're forced to. You know what I mean? People are like knocking on your door, they're sending you messages on social media, doing all these things and they're upset, as opposed to doing it because they're like, hey, where would we fit in that? That people are putting in the chat, like, would this be an example? That's a good approach. Or we're thinking about, are we a part of this, and how could we, should we or shouldn't we? um for me, everything that I know about the why, everything that I know about when it comes down to the goals and the values and everything, it's about building people up. It's about creating community. It's about getting to know each other. It's about, all of these things. I'm assuming you then that the goal is to reduce the amount of conflicts and barriers to access and all that for anyone. And so the better we can do, by changing some of those things around, by not making people feel like they're not a part of, or making them feel like they're a part of something that's superficial, and even if it's unintentional due to tradition or whatever, uh, that just aligns with the goals of the why, from what I can tell and everything I've experienced. So, but doing it restoratively, I think is the way to go. That's what I would recommend. Having open dialogue, looking at names of things and practices and asking questions, reaching out to your local tribal communities, not ones far away. And so start with your local tribal communities. Um, and then being prepared to, hear their feedback, struggle with it if needed. But stay in community with that even after any changes that happen. Make sure your staff are aware of changes that are being made, and having things be intentional about, this is the new name or this is the new approach and things. And so everyone kind of top to bottom. And if you're going to keep a name or use a name, and even if you get permission or whatever, I always say, I don't know about you, but my kids' names, both their Ojibwe names and their English names, my son's name is Che. Some of you might know the person named Che Guevara, a well-known revolutionary. I must have wanted him to grow up and do something in life for a community. Anyway, and it's spelled CHE, but it has that cool line above it, that like you'll see in Spanish and stuff. So his name's Che. And he gets called Chi and Shay and a lot of things. Once in a while, he gets just right out the box, they call him Che. But I taught him, and I always corrected everybody who mispronounced his name, because he's my son and he deserves to have his name pronounced the way that it is. And I raised him to also make those changes for himself, when he tell people, my name's called this. And so if you're going to use a name, to me, it's important that that name be pronounced correctly. Just like I said, if it were your name for your family or whatever, would you want it to be pronounced the way that your grandparents say it the way that you say it? Or is it okay for it to just be changed? So I think that's important. And I think it's important work to do. So here's just some things to consider, how to address old names, logos, practices, embracing a new name or a new practice or a new logo. It's like all these different things. And then, connecting with a why that went through this process. A lot can be learned from folks who have already gone through things. If you're endeavoring to make a change like this, or you're trying to just be more knowledgeable of those kinds of things, there are some whys that are out there, and asking that question of what was that like? What did you learn from it? Is it still ongoing? Well, how could we do it better? Our own resources from within can be really, really powerful, and we should never forget that. And um, all of you, that if there's any of you who've gone through those processes and various things, you probably know it better sometimes than myself, not being a full-time staff or something like that. So I just want to throw those things out there. Some of the last things, you can look at these on the slideshow, really. Just parting thoughts. They're actually the same ones. I just kept the same ones, I think, from the very first ever one, because I was like, I still stand by these. There's nothing any different. The other parting thought is, if you would like me to come to your Y, and it's in a cool location that I've never been to, you can gladly reach out to me. No, I'm just joking. But yeah, these are just some recommendations that I kind of hold true for pretty much any kind of work and things. And that's just to remember who you are, embrace who you are. And if you can do that, you can know that you'll know how unique you are yourself. And if you can believe in that, you can probably believe that there are other people who are unique. It's just that they're uniquely different than yourself. And so the more we can all do that, I think the more that we can learn about ourselves, so that we can learn about others. And that's how we begin to have places that are the most accessible, have places that are most welcoming, have places that are the most uh, open to our differences, and so we can see growth and do the work for everybody. So some people in the chat here. I don't want to lose the chat when we're done. Ellie, if you have an idea for that, that would be great. We do have 5 minutes. If anyone has any questions from stuff that we threw up or put up here, and you're willing to ask them, I would love to ask them,
And I
or
will
to try to
stop
answer.
the recording here and just give a
Okay.
really thank you to you for the official record that will be saved on the recording. And give me 1 second.